Hi there, and thanks for joining me this morning as we continue celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. Last week we talked about how God brought those women who first arrived at the tomb from great fear to great joy. This morning we want to keep exploring what happened in those hours following that first resurrection morning. My outline for this morning is this: to talk about a marathon. Talk about locking things out, inviting things in, and giving what you've got. For some reason this week, I ended up reading about the 1904 Olympics that happened in St. Louis, specifically about the marathon that happened. The marathon, as you may or may not know, is a race about 40 kilometers long. And this year, for some reason, the organizers decided that they wouldn't start the marathon until the afternoon. Well, in this particular afternoon, it was 33 above when those 32 athletes lined up at the starting line. For some reason, also this year, they decided only to have one water station halfway through the race. That's a long way to run without a drink. And from the moment they fired that starting gun, it was just chaos. There's no better word for it. The man who finished first in that race decided halfway through actually to quit the race. And he hitchhiked a ride back to the stadium. But on the way back to the stadium, the car that he was in broke down. So he got out of the car and started jogging along. And as people saw him, they started cheering him on. And he kind of got caught up in that a little bit. And as he got to the stadium, people were just applauding and cheering and shouting his name. And so he went ahead and just crossed the finish line and accepted gold. He even got his picture taken with the president's daughter. President Roosevelt's daughter took a picture with him before he was found out and had to admit that he had in fact given up and taken a ride back to the stadium. The person who finished second also wanted to give up, but his trainers and coaches wouldn't let him. They decided to give him an injection to kind of boost him and give him some more energy, so they injected him with rat poison and brandy. Rat poison. They thought this would give him more energy and spur him on, and what it did is it nearly killed him. He, in fact, started hallucinating just wildly, and his trainers ended up carrying him across the finish line, and as he was hallucinating and being carried, he just kept shuffling his feet as though he was still running the race. Another one of the athletes was actually broke at the time. He hadn't eaten for 40 hours leading up to the start of the marathon and didn't have any track clothes with him. So he just borrowed a pair of scissors, cut off the pants that he was wearing, and started this race. But as he was running, his hunger really got to him, and he was going past an orchard and decided to stop and just eat a few apples. Well, it turns out the apples that he was eating were rotten, and he ended up having such huge stomach cramps, he had to lay down and just take a nap during the race, and he still managed to place that year, finishing fourth. Another one of the racers almost died from inhaling so much dust. They were running on these dusty roads, and the marshal's car was driving in front of him, spitting out all this exhaust and dust that he kept on inhaling. Another one of the racers would have finished probably better, but a dog chased him a full mile off track before he could get back and try and finish the race. In the end, only 14 of the 32 racers who started that afternoon were able to finish this marathon that was just chaos from start to finish. Chaos would also be a pretty good word to describe that very first Easter. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all record the account of Easter, that first Easter morning. And as you read through it, it's challenging to piece together exactly what happens. Here's my best understanding of how those events unfold. We're told that very early in the morning, a group of women set off to the tomb. As they arrive there, as we heard last week, there's an earthquake as an angel rolls the stone out of the way. And at that point, it seems like Mary Magdalene looks in the tomb, sees that it's empty, and runs to get Peter and John. The other women stay at the tomb and have this interaction with the angels who are there, who tell them that Jesus has in fact risen, and they should go tell the other disciples. And so they leave to tell those disciples. Meanwhile, Mary has made it to Peter and John, wherever they're staying, told them that Jesus' tomb is empty. They don't know what to make of that, so they run to the tomb to check it out, and Mary seems to follow them. They get to the tomb, take a look, it's empty, and they leave. Mary Magdalene stays there crying and spots a man who she assumes is the gardener. and says, listen, if you have taken him, tell me where you've put him. Well, then suddenly Jesus calls her name and she recognizes that is in fact Jesus. He tells her to keep going, to go find the other disciples and tell them this incredible news. So she leaves, and then Jesus appears to those other women, and somehow they missed John and Peter and Mary Magdalene. Just in passing, they missed them, but Jesus appears to those women now. They're overwhelmed with joy, overcome. They collapse at the feet of Jesus and worship him before he sends them off as well to go and find these disciples. Finally, this crowd of women make it to the disciples, tell them that Jesus is in fact alive, that the tomb is empty, that he has come back from the dead, and the disciples don't believe them. Meanwhile, there's also this other storyline going, because those guards, remember the guards at the tomb who froze and became like dead men? Well, they make their way to Pilate, and they come up with this plan to tell everyone that they had fallen asleep and the disciples had come and stolen the body of Jesus. And I wonder if anyone believed that, because soldiers wouldn't normally fall asleep on the job and live to tell about it. But Jesus still isn't done yet, even though that's already been hectic enough. Then we're told that he appears to Peter, even though the Bible doesn't tell us any more about that, other than that the event itself happened. Then he appears to these two disciples on the road to Emmaus. Maybe you remember hearing that story. They're walking along, Jesus appears, they don't recognize him, and he explains the scriptures to them. They ask him to stay and to eat with them, and so as he does that, as he breaks the bread, their eyes are open. They recognize that it's Jesus, and then he disappears. So they get up after making this journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus, turn right back around and go and tell the disciples who are gathered together, hey, we've seen the Lord. And they start to celebrate in this mix of grief and wonder and chaos and confusion and excitement and delight. It's a lot going on, all on that same very first Easter day. We're going to pick up the story now as we turn to John's Gospel, as he records this in chapter 20 for us. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Let me just highlight a couple of things from that reading from John 20. It tells us that the disciples are all together. They've gathered together. And this has been such a traumatic, wild, crazy day for them. The man that they've been grieving, this Jesus that they had followed for 3 years, dedicating their lives to, believing that he was the anticipated one, the chosen one, the anointed one, the Messiah they were waiting for, has just been killed. They betrayed him. They deny him. They flee from him as he's crucified on the cross. Judas, they find out, is the one who has betrayed Jesus, and he has gone now, and he has killed himself, actually, in this great act of guilt and regret. But now Sunday's rolled around. Now Sunday has come in. This group of women have been to the tomb and said that they've seen angels and that the stone was rolled away and that they've even encountered Jesus. And now here Peter is saying that he has seen Jesus, and these other disciples coming from Emmaus say that they have seen Jesus too. And they're just overwhelmed, I think, with the uncertainty of everything that is going on. In addition to that, they're afraid. They're afraid of the Jewish leaders. And so they've gathered together in this house, but they have made sure that the doors are locked so that no one can get in and harm them. Let me read those words for you one more time. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. The doors are locked because the disciples are afraid. They're afraid of the Jewish leaders. And so here they are 2,000 years ago practicing self-isolation because there is a very real threat. How many of us are living there right now? Under COVID-19, how many of us are living in this place of fear and wonder and concern and doubt and worry and all those other things? You know, one of the things I think that we love is routine. And so we in the past have just taken our routines for granted, our routine of going to work or going to the store or going to church or going to school, all those different things. Even if you're an introvert, I think introverts also plan times where they're going to interact with people. Maybe it's over coffee, or maybe it's at the gym, or maybe it's just going where you want, when you want, for whatever reason you want. And now that's been taken from us. Now we're handing that over so that we can protect ourselves and protect the people we care about. Listen, church, whatever you're feeling, grief, anger, frustration, boredom, I just want you to know all those things are okay things to be feeling. Being a Christian doesn't mean that you're always smiling, just puking out Bible verses and everything is sunshine and rainbows all day long. You can be faithfully following Jesus, experiencing a huge range of emotions and carrying a whole suitcase full of questions with you. I hope that you're self-distancing. I hope that you're taking this opportunity to practice family worship at home and to be reading the Bible together and praying together and singing God's praises together, or at least trying to fit pieces of those into each day as you make the most of this opportunity and this time that we've been given. We find the disciples here with the doors locked because they're specifically trying to lock out the Jewish leaders because they're afraid. It makes me wonder, what are you afraid of? Or what are you discouraged about? I would encourage you to try and name that as specifically as you can. What exactly is it that you're feeling right now? Or that's troubling you right now? I'd encourage you to specifically name that and then just pray to Jesus about that. Jesus, I am just really worried about this virus. Jesus, please lock it out from our house. We're going to do everything we can to self-distance. I just want you to stop it at the door, shut it out, keep it away from our family. Or Jesus, you know that we already struggle with anxiety. We just want you to lock that out, Jesus. Keep us safe and just protect us from anxiety in these four walls. To come up with what it is that you're worried about, concerned about, frightened about, frustrated about, and then just name that to Jesus and pray about it. Jesus, please keep that out of this house. Let's turn back to John 20. It says this: On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." I love that the doors are locked, but that doesn't stop Jesus. He doesn't know some secret knock that he does at the door. He doesn't bust down the doors. He doesn't climb in a window. He's just suddenly, miraculously, and powerfully there with them. And church, I want you to know that Jesus is there with you as well. As real as it was that day, it's just as real this day. That through the power of the resurrection, Jesus is present with us as well. Present with you in your worries, present with you in your doubts, present with you in your questions, present with you in your fears and frustrations. He is present with you and your family wherever you are right now. He's promised us that. Let me read this from Matthew 28, where he says that's promised to us. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. God promises it so many times. Here's another one in Isaiah 1:9. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Did you catch what Jesus brings to the disciples? It was peace. Peace be with you, Jesus says. How many of you could use a bit of peace right now? I think some of you could use some peace in your hearts. Your hearts are actually just racing. You can just feel your heart pounding. Peace in that. Maybe some of you need some peace because you just can't shut your mind off at night. You lay down and you just can't sleep. You just keep thinking about all these different what ifs or should haves or would haves or could haves. Peace in your hearts, peace in your minds. Some of you maybe need peace in your family. This situation, this COVID-19 and being self-distancing and isolating is very challenging. I know that it's causing lots of conflict in families. Maybe you need peace in your household, peace with your children, peace in your marriage. Maybe it's causing grief for you. And so maybe you need some peace in your grief as you continue calling out to Jesus. These disciples are afraid, and so they've got the doors locked, and Jesus comes in and he knows what they need. They need peace. What do you need? What do you need from Jesus right now? I know we just talked about locking some things out, but what do you need to invite in? Maybe you need to invite in some time for relationship. Just because we're self-distancing doesn't mean we can't still connect over phone or Skype or Zoom or email. Find some way that works for you and keep connecting with people. I've tried to phone through our whole church directory. I think that I've gotten everyone. If I missed you, please call me. Or if I left a message, call me. I would be happy to talk to you, and you all have my cell number. Let's keep connecting and finding ways to do that to encourage one another. What is it that you need right now? Jesus is able to bring that to you. The disciples need peace, and so Jesus brings peace to them. But it makes me think of another situation where Paul is actually locked away, and it feels like everyone has deserted him. That's what he tells us. And so I want to read this passage for you from 2 Timothy, where Paul is talking about this difficult situation he's in as he writes these words. But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength. Paul is literally all alone. Everyone has deserted him, but he says, you know what? The Lord didn't desert me. The Lord has stood by my side and given me strength. Paul didn't need peace. He was already at peace in this situation, but what he needed was that strength, that encouragement, knowing that God was right there with him. In Matthew 7, Jesus says this, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. I love the invitation that Jesus gives here. Ask me. Just go ahead and ask me. What is it that you need? Ask and you will receive. Jesus, I need patience. You got it. Jesus, I need some peace right now. Yes, peace coming your way. I need some strength right now, some comfort. Yes, Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. We talked about specifically naming what we want to keep locked out. Now I'd encourage you to think about specifically what do you need to invite in and then ask Jesus for it. Jesus, I need this. Could you please give me some? And you fill in the blank. The disciples needed peace. They didn't even know that that's what they needed, but he brought it to them. Paul says, I didn't need peace. What I needed was strength, and that's what Jesus brings to him. I know we just talked about locking some things out, but now I want to encourage you to think about what you need to invite Jesus to bring in to you and to your family, and then to ask him for that. Try and pinpoint that as specifically as you can as well. And then if you can do that, just down to a word or a thought, I'd encourage you to turn that into a breath prayer. I don't know if you've heard of that before. I've used that in the past and found it really helpful actually for me, where you just have this word, this one thing you need. Maybe it is peace. And each time you breathe, you just keep asking Jesus for it. Peace, Jesus. I need peace. Jesus, would you bring me some peace? Please, Jesus. And what I found is when I'm doing that, there isn't an opportunity for grief or frustration or anxiety to creep in, because I'm not letting myself dwell on that thing. Instead, I'm just calling out to Jesus again and again. Jesus, you know I need peace. Peace, Jesus. Please bring me some peace. Let's go back to John 20. Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. The disciples go from being filled with grief to being filled with this chaos and confusion on Sunday afternoon. And now they're just overwhelmed with joy. That transition, similar to what we saw with the women earlier that morning, from this incredible grief to this incredible joy as they see Jesus. That's what causes them to be filled with joy. As they saw the Lord, as they saw it was him, as they saw Jesus right there with them, they were suddenly filled with joy as he speaks peace to them. Jesus didn't appear and condemn them. He doesn't appear and shout at them. He doesn't read them the riot act. Hey, listen, you guys abandoned me. You denied me. You gave up on me. You doubted me. Jesus doesn't do any of that. Jesus forgives them. Jesus says peace to them. And he can do that because he's paid for that peace. Through his perfect life and his death and his resurrection, he has won that forgiveness, that freedom, that peace for them. And church, he has done the very same for you. If you're wrestling, if you're struggling, if you've been caught up in a sin, if you've had moments of weakness or you've done things that you regret, Jesus isn't wagging a finger at you saying, I'm condemning you. I'm so disappointed in you. He's saying, peace. I've paid for you. I've paid for your forgiveness. And I love you and I am present there with you. I hope that you can sense his presence. I hope that you can see him at work. I hope that you can feel him bringing you comfort and strength and peace and whatever you need as you try and lock things out and invite good things in from him. I'm going to read verse 21 for you as we wrap up our time together. Again, Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. Jesus shares peace with them again. And then look at what he does. He sends them out. This group of disciples that just minutes ago were filled with fear, that were huddled together, that were locked away, that were hiding from the rest of the world. Jesus says, peace be with you. And now as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And church, Jesus is sending us out as well. You can put your bums back on the couches for a minute. Because Jesus isn't sending you out of your house right now. He's not. Jesus is sending you to pick up your phone, to write a letter, to open up your laptop, and to reach out to the world around you. I've heard from lots of you that you're sharing messages, that you're sharing Bible verses, you're just phoning up people, offering to pray with them, maybe people you haven't talked with for a while. And that's what Jesus is doing for us now, to give them what we've got. Listen, you can't give what you don't have. So if you're filled with a fear or worry or anxiety, if you're struggling with something, then please reach out so that we know that. Phone me, phone the church office, phone some trusted friends who can pray with you so they can pour into you. Please don't struggle on your own. But if you do have peace, if you are feeling strong, if you are encouraged, then I would encourage you to give him what you've got, to share what Jesus has already given to you. As we lock things out, as we invite things in, and as we give him what we've got. Church, this is a marathon. I started by talking about that 1904 Olympic marathon that happened. This COVID-19 is a marathon. We are a month in over that now of self-distancing. And we don't know when it will end, but we do know this. It will end. This too shall pass. This moment, this season in our lives will also come to an end. But right now it is a marathon. Maybe the month has seemed like a marathon. Maybe each week seems like a marathon. Maybe every single day just leaves you exhausted like you're running a marathon. I can tell you that every night this week I've fallen asleep on the couch by 7 o'clock as my family sits around me watching DuckTales, and I've snored through every single episode. Church, I have never run a marathon in my life. I may need to if I gain the COVID-19. I've maybe surpassed that already. But I've heard this, that in a marathon, it helps to set a goal. This is my goal. I'm going to just keep running this pace to the end of the block. This is my goal. I'm going to keep up this tempo to the end of the song. This is my goal. Each kind of step or segment of the way. And church, I'd encourage you as you run this marathon to come up with a goal. Maybe it's a daily goal. Maybe it would normally seem like a really easy goal, but today it's all you've got. Say my goal is that my kids eat 3 times. And if that's Kellogg's 3 meals a day, or if it's McCain's or Pizza Pops or whatever it is, that's going to be good enough. Not a vegetable in sight, but that's my goal. We eat 3 times. Maybe my goal is that we spend a bit of time praying together, and that's all I've got to give today. Maybe my goal is doing half the homework we've been assigned. Maybe my goal is phoning 2 friends and connecting with them. Pick a goal and give them what you got as you run this marathon, and know that as you do, that heaven is cheering you on and you are not alone. We're going through this all together. So if you need that encouragement, please do reach out. Let me read these words from Hebrews 12 as I wrap up this morning. It says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Church, you are surrounded. Surrounded by people who are praying with you and for you. Surrounded by this great company of heaven who's cheering you on as you run this race, this marathon of faith, which includes going through COVID-19. And you are not alone. I hope that you know that God is with you today, this very hour, this whole week, as you lock things out, as you invite Jesus to bring things in, as you give him what you've got, the peace, the hope, the comfort, the joy that God has given to you. And may you hear Jesus speak these words to you: "Peace be with you." In Jesus' name, amen.